Oh yeah.
Aye. Might as well have a beat.
Hello and welcome to Spot Rugby League. As you can see, we're joined for the first time in a while actually over video chat because of the unprecedented times at the moment. We're joined by Joe, Paul and Jack, and we're going to discuss today, we're going to discuss as much as we can about the Rugby League season, how and if it can finish, what happens with relegation, promotion, is it going to be played behind closed doors? I'll come to you first, Joe. What do you actually think is going to be a realistic solution from here? Obviously, the game's got funding recently, which is going to keep us ticking over for a bit longer. But in terms of the sport on the pitch, when and if do you see it returning?
Well, part of me is thinking, even though they're confident they can get this pandemic over and done in June, I'd maybe leave it another month till July, because the players, even if we do get it done by June, it's a slim possibility. Even if we get it done by June, then I'd maybe have an extra month off to get them all trained up again. I know players will be doing their own training and whatnot, but I'd still give them another month off. And if we can get it back in July and then carry out the fixtures as normal, cancel the loop fixtures. Unfortunately, possibly even have to cancel the Ashes, because even though that would be a bit disheartening, I think that would be the best result if you want to get all the games in this year. And if you can get the season done by December or something, I'd then start next season in March, and yet again 2021 cancel the loop fixtures, 23 games, and go from there. But that's in the future. But that's the way forward it should be for me, Ben. If we can get it done by June, the virus.
Well, obviously, the other big elephant in the room is the fans. Now, in football, they're talking about bringing the Premier League back. I think it's 10 neutral venues they're looking at, and even that's not guaranteed to come back. They're about playing the whole of next season behind closed doors. Now, if that's the case for Rugby League, Paul, how are we meant to survive?
Well, it's going to be really hard for the game. Obviously, we're seeing it from other sports as well. I think they had the idea of about season ticket holders streaming games, the home games for free. Everybody else can log in and pay. I think that sounds quite promising. If obviously the streaming problems can be sorted out, you would imagine that's probably going to favour the big teams. Obviously, they'll probably have more people wanting to log in to see their games. So I don't know how they're going to use that with that spread of that 16 million. But obviously, it's going to be very, very tough for clubs to survive, because I think football, other sports, even the NRL tend to rely on TV revenue for the bulk of what they spend. I think we've seen a lot of Super League clubs, chairman, especially the lower down clubs, tend to rely on match day revenue as opposed to TV revenue. Obviously they're not going to get that, are they?
No. Well, I can see you nodding and shaking your head throughout that, Jack. What are your thoughts on both of them? Firstly, when you see the game coming back, and what do you think is going to happen in terms of the fans and the money?
If I'm honest, I can't see it coming back by June or even July, I don't think. I think we're looking at a much longer time scale until we're back in action. And if I'm honest, I think the best solution possibly could be a season that's short, even maybe 10 games, if that, 10, 11 games, give each team another chance to play each other once. You factor in the likes of Catalans, Toronto, who've obviously got to travel. That's another big elephant in the room, is the fact that I can't see, if I'm honest, flights internationally being back on until probably next year. I think we're looking at the turn of the year until flights are all allowed to go ahead again, and that obviously poses a huge problem. I know Catalans obviously have a part of the French government's scheme of not allowing mass gatherings until the end of August. So again, that throws another spanner in the works. And if I'm honest, I don't think we can do games behind closed doors. I really, really don't. I just don't think it's financially viable. Not just for lower league teams, but even for certain Super League clubs to be able to play games behind closed doors. There's so much. So much of their income relies on gate receipts, on drinks, on food, on program sales, lottery sales. There's so much of a match day that goes into a club's overall income that a lot of clubs would be playing on a loss. I think then if we were to go behind closed doors, you'd then have to bring all the staff back in, pay them all in full because they're working. At the end of the day, they're back in full time or part time for the championship. Playing, and you're not actually then making money, or at least enough money out of them playing. So I can't see that happening. I think we look at football, for example. I don't think it'll be too long until at least League One and League Two in Britain are cancelled and called off for the rest of the season, because they're in a similar boat to what I've just been saying, is that I don't think they'll be able to financially be able to afford playing games behind closed doors. And like I said, I think it'll be the same for Rugby League. I really don't think we're able, even with the 16 million cash injection, I don't think we're able to afford to play games behind closed doors at all. I really don't.
No.
Yeah, I think so. I just probably, obviously we spoke to a few players as well. I think the big problem is going to be testing. I think, obviously before a vaccine, the players that we've spoke to have all said if they are going to come back before the vaccine, they're going to want players tested probably twice a week if they're going to go and smashing into each other. Obviously for things like the Premier League, the NRL, the cost of that can well be met. But obviously even in Super League, I mean, you're talking needing for like testing into four figures. Probably the cost of that's going to be really high. I think I don't know. I mean, I think Sky, as said about the Sky, I think they are going to be desperate to get live sport on. So I don't know. There might be a case of going back to Sky and maybe asking for a bit more to cover some of the costs that the clubs are going to have to endure.
Well, I think we're all widely agreed that the season in some capacity is going to be limited if he does come back. And obviously we spoke about that 16 million now. How far is that going to go? I mean, how is it going to be split, first of all? Because obviously the bread and butter of the game is Super League. They've got to take priority over anyone. And without the big teams at the top, we don't really have anything doing. We don't have a product. So are we just going to have to put much of that 16 million into Super League? What would happen to the Championship then? Because I think somebody said that the Championship might actually be coping a little bit better with this, with their players being part-time and they're furloughing the staff, and they're probably more of a reflection of the wages they're on. Whereas in Super League, the clubs are struggling with money because obviously with this government scheme, they're only getting up to £2,500 a month. You've got players on 150 grand a year more than that, marquee players. So how do we distribute this money, and how far is it going to go? Are we going to be looking at asking for another loan or grant from the government in a couple of months?
Well, probably then, because I mean, you've even had the likes of Hull FC, for example. I mean, they've admitted their money struggles, and they're basically known as one of the richer clubs of the game. And when they say they're struggling, you know that it's serious, 30. So you might have a point by Rugby League. They've asked for 16 million. It might double, it might treble before we get ourselves out of this hole. It's unfortunate. And as well as that, then we might have to highlight I mean, I don't know if this is on subject. What about the international game? Because I said earlier, didn't I? If we cancel the Ashes this year, because we might run out of time, do you think we should play more international games next year? Because you mentioned, we need to give it an international product, don't we? It's okay, we can survive Super League, but then what if the international game dies because we haven't had any for a while? It's a concerning factor, isn't it?
Well, I think that's different, because I think at international level, we're not going to lose the nations, are we? I think we're at serious risk of losing our clubs here. We're at serious risk of losing the clubs on our doorstep. Clubs that make the game what it is.
I just keep thinking if we do lose it on our doorstep, though, that brought me onto this point. Will that affect the international game if we do lose some clubs? Because if we lost a couple of Super League clubs and we struggle to have a Super League, that in a way, is that the chain reaction? Would that affect international and we won't have an international game?
Well, without a doubt, yeah. It's all going to be a knock-on effect within the game. But I just think they've got to prioritise, and I think the Ashes is one of the easiest things to cut at this stage.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know if you're going to get some sort of season on or what.
We have a World Cup next year, don't we, as well? So
World Cup. We've got the World Cup next season.
Should everything get shortened as well? Like, let next year automatically cut the loop fixtures and maybe have, and this is what everyone's talking about, maybe 3 international games for England against the Exiles again. If you cut the loop fixtures, why not?
Yeah, potentially. I think that's got to take a back burner for me as the international game. As much as it pains me to say it, and it is important that we grow that aspect of our game, I just think at the moment in the position we're in, we have no choice but to just try and focus on our clubs, our community clubs, and just try and save the game now. if we go back to Super League, it's going to be tricky to get this season back on. There's been a number of clubs who are obviously posing the question. There's talks of Super League and the RFL coming together again. That'll save costs and they can cut costs and save money, because again, trying to save money if and where it can. But I think we've got to be serious about this. Even with that 16 million, we are at serious risk. And
it's not worth forgetting that 16 million's a loan as well. It's not worth forgetting. I think some people tend to think, they've just been handed. That money is going to have to be paid back as well. And obviously, if they go back for more, then that extra would. So I mean, clubs are going to be. I mean, it's better to be in debt than not existing. Don't get me wrong. So the money is welcome, but I think some people just need to remember that money's a loan, it's not a handout.
Yeah, and obviously another point is, if we get on to the season itself, when the season does restart, if we are to say restart Super League or the Championship, I think one of the big things in football at the moment is that the promotion relegation now. It's the be all and end all of the Championship, and I just don't know whether we're in a position, if we say go with what Jack's concept was, and we end up playing 10 matches, 10 round of fixtures. We can't relegate a team after 10 fixtures. And I just feel this is probably the time now where we're just going to have to get on to looking at, if we restart the season, I think we're going to be adding to Super League rather than promotion, relegation, staying as it.
I think there has to be promotion. I think it wouldn't be fair there wasn't promotion. I think, but I mean, obviously 10 games or 12 games or whatever, a club like Toronto won't have even played a game in their own backyard. So I think relegating somebody on the basis of that would be very tough. I think, we could possibly go up to 13, 14 teams in Super League next year. And like Joe's saying, having a shortened season, just play each other once as opposed to twice, and maybe split the second game in just for Wigan, Saints, Hull KR, Leeds and Leeds and Castleford, just them clubs play each other twice, or have a magic weekend to add it up. But I think it's certainly, clubs playing 10 games certainly don't deserve to be relegated. But then again, the Championship has to have a grand final. And if that grand final doesn't come with promotion, it's probably pretty much going to be a meaningless game, isn't it, for everybody apart from the two clubs involved?
I think we're quite lucky at the minute in the fact that we are still very early on in our season, especially if you compare it to football, where they're literally if you talk about the Championship, League One, whatever, promotion, relegation, they're in the running. They're into their last 10 games, where those last 10 games mean so much. And where we are, Super League and the Championship and League One, we're not at a point yet where clubs are necessarily thinking about that, I don't think. When the competition cut off, what round were we? Round 7, round 8 we were in?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's all, yeah. Some are round 5, I think some are 2 or 3 games behind, aren't they?
Yeah, exactly. So there's so much rugby still to play. When the season was suspended, there was so much still to play that the games that early on in the season, often when it comes down to it, the crunch matches that you tend to get, in August, September time, when teams are seriously looking at threat of either relegation or promotion. So I think that's the one. In one sense, we are lucky that teams aren't literally on the edge yet, which is why I don't think we need to necessarily consider promotion, relegation until we know where we're at in terms of restarting the competition. Obviously that's the priority, is knowing when we're going to be back playing, and that, I think, is when we can actually start thinking, right, what are we going to do about promotion and relegation? We're still in the early days as of yet. We could start playing again in the next 2 months. We don't know, and at which point then we'd still be a good 2-3 months away from having to know who's coming up and who's going down. So I don't think that's a massive worry at the minute. I think, again, like I said, the priority is to know when we're going to be back, and then we can start worrying about those technicalities.
Yeah, I think
the
biggest worry, like you say, is obviously the money now. If we're going back to that, and we're talking about the 16 million that's been loaned, as we say, that will still need to be paid back. I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, how is this going to be best distributed throughout the league? Is it going to go right through the leagues, or are some clubs going to get more than others? And how long is it going to last? What do you think, Paul?
Well, I hate to say it, but I'll probably get slated for it. But you do have to look after the Super League clubs. I mean, the Super League is it's the advertisement for the sport. It's what everybody watches on Sky. It's the way we promote the sport. After this, we're going to have to bring new people into the sport. The only way to do that really is through Super League, and then we can get them to. You get people into the game through Super League, and then you can get them to go to their local clubs if there isn't one. The Super League club near them, so I do think we probably have to prioritise Super League. As much as I don't like saying it, I mean they are the lifeblood of the sport, unfortunately, as opposed to the grassroots. But you'd like to think of the Super League clubs, if they were propped up and they become healthy again, obviously that money would filter down and they would help the clubs in their area below them.
Well, yeah, without Super League, well, just saying, Ben, without Super League, as Paul went and said there, I mean, that you just say it, and that is what players from other parts of the world, as well as academies, that's what they strive to be, isn't it? They want to play at the top level in this country. I mean, otherwise you wouldn't have a sport in this country. So Paul, you went and said you might get some grief for that, but to be honest, I think you're spot on.
Yeah, I understand where you're coming from, and similar to Joe's point earlier, where he mentioned about some of the richer clubs. Might be one of the some of the worst affected because of the full-time wages and compared to the part-time and that sort of stuff. I still don't think you can completely neglect the Championship clubs or the League One clubs. I think the one thing I think is vital throughout all this process is transparency, and I think every single club who is involved or eligible for part of this loan needs to have full transparency with the RFL about their finances. I don't know how much transparency there is on a regular basis, but I think given the dire straits that some clubs would end up plunging into should things get worse and worse and worse, and this keeps going on and on and on. They do need complete transparency, need to keep in communication with the RFL about where they're at financially. I think alongside that as well comes a certain amount of transparency with fans. At the end of the day, fans are the lifeblood of the game. The game won't be around without the fans, and if, for example, like I personally don't think that it should be evenly split. I think you give more money to the clubs that desperately need it. But again, that's why they need to be honest and they need transparency with the RFL about how much money they've got or how close they are to the edge, etc. But if certain clubs are being given more than another, then fans are going to want to know why. We're going to want to know why, for example, Rochdale are being given more money than Featherstone, or just to use two examples. We want to know why that's happening, and again, that requires some transparency from the clubs and possibly from the RFL. This club are this close to the edge. They need to pay this, and this. So that's why we've given them that much, and that sort of thing. I think that at the end of the day, that's what it comes down to is having that transparency and knowing exactly where each club is at, and that's the only way I think it'll be split fairly.
Yeah, I think you've subbed that up fairly, to be honest, Jack. And it's a bit hard to say like what's going to happen. Obviously, we're going to find out in a couple of days what's going to happen with the lockdown, if it's going to be extended. I think everybody is expecting it's going to be extended. We're going to slowly stagger people back into work, the way of living. It's going to be a slow process, and I think one of the final things that is going to come in is people, events that involve people with mass gatherings. Obviously, sports events falls into that bracket, which is a worry now. Hopefully, like you say, in a couple of months, 2-3 months, we can get back underway. We can get back to normality. We can get back to having fans in stadiums, the game going on. But we've discussed there briefly about the international game, and that's probably going to be one of the things that falls by the wayside now. We've postponed Magic Weekend. We've not cancelled it. The Summer Bash is cancelled, but we've postponed Magic Weekend. We're yet to change the date for the Challenge Cup final, which is in July, which is looking increasingly unlikely. We've mentioned the loot fixtures as well. So we say we do come back in a couple of months. What do we cut? Now, we discussed the loot fixtures, but what do we do with, say, the Challenge Cup? What do we do with the dates for the major occasions? Do we keep that venue at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium for the Ashes? Do we use that as the grand final? What are you feeling would be the best way to go about it? Say we did come back in, what is it now, 4th of May? Say we come back on the 4th of July. How do we go about it?
Well, it's a shame, really, because, I mean, I'd say carry on the fixtures from there, as in the league fixtures, from July onwards. I'd play them out. Now, it's difficult because I don't think you can ask the players to play twice in a week, can you? That would be too telling on the bodies. I mean, they've already gone and said that. I think it was Gary Etherington who went and said up to 3 times a week. It was him, wasn't it? But I can't remember who it was now. A player turned around and said, no, that's not on. Actually, no, Simon Wolford got that one. But no, he was right to say 2 or 3 times a week. No, because once is enough on them. So I'd say July, carry it on, as in the scheduled fixtures onwards. Then when we get to mid-September, which is when the playoffs start from, just from round 7 onwards, Catalan's games in hand will have to come on to them. But yeah, as for the major occasions now, it would break tradition, but 1 year early. What choice do we have? Grand final, it's probably going to have to be November. The cup final at Old Trafford in October, that's looking likely. Grand final at Spurs, and then, Magic Weekend. I don't know, I mean...
I think Magic Weekend, as it's an extra fixture, Magic Weekend's the first week that can go, really. I think, it'd be a shame to lose it. It's a great occasion, but it can go. As for the grand final, I mean, we already have a date at the Spurs Stadium at the end of November. I mean, I'd probably be looking to get the grand final played then. And I think we've mentioned this before. As for the Cup, what I'd probably do is leave the Cup till December. I think there's 4 rounds or 5 rounds left to go. You can play that week by week, the week after the grand final, leading up to Christmas. It means, every week half the teams are going to be getting their break a little bit earlier. If it's going to go that late, I'd probably leave the Cup till after the grand final. Obviously, the internationals are going to have to go. The Aussies aren't going to come over anyway, let's be honest. They've had enough troubles over there. I agree with you. I think 3 times a week's ridiculous, as is 2. I mean, they played 2 times at Easter, and the players didn't like that. Doing that every week just doesn't sound decent to me. So I mean, the playoffs. I think we have a 4-week playoff system now. I think we could certainly cut that to 2 and go back to the semi-final between 1 and 4, 2 and 3. That would give us another 2 weeks. Like I say, I would aim to have the grand final at the Tottenham Stadium at the end of November, and then maybe play the Cup after that. And say for Magic Weekend again, I mean, it's going to be the football season now when we're playing it. I can't see many football clubs want to see their pitch used for 6 games in 3 days when the football season's on. I mean, usually it's when the football season's over, isn't it?
Yeah, well, Newcastle certainly won't. But yeah, you're right, Paul. I mean, if not Newcastle, who else would take on? They wouldn't. You are right. I'd probably cut Magic Weekend altogether this season.
Yeah.
You see, I think that could be the first fixture back, even Magic Weekend, depending on when they can get it on. I think there's so much. What we're going to need, I think, once everything does resume again, is a big cash injection. Similarly to, I guess, the 16 million loan. We obviously won't get get that to the same extent with Magic Weekend, but there's no doubting that Magic Weekend is a huge, huge cash cow for the RFL and Super League. The amount of fans that flock there, it is like a pilgrimage, literally. And always produces great action. It's a brilliant weekend for the fans. It's exactly what fans need to get spirits back up, get morale back up, get them back into the season, enjoying themselves, as well as raising a good bit, as a whole for Super League, for the competition, raising a good chunk of money, which I think is exactly what is needed.
The only thing I'll say about that, Jack, Magic Weekend being the first week back, if we start again in July, I wouldn't have it the first week of July, because I did say earlier, the first week of July is Super League round. I'd leave that the same. Maybe have the Magic Weekend when the Cup final was going to be mid-July. I just thought I'd point maybe that out, because you don't want another week of rearranging Super League fixtures, do you?
No. Would we allow big crowds then, though? At the end, by July, I think we could be looking at the earliest October before we allow big crowds in stadiums. That's the only problem. I mean, I think that sounds like a great idea, but that would all depend whether we'd be able to have mass crowd events, within a couple of months, which you'd have to wonder about. But it would be a great idea if that was the case, if they got some kind of word from the government.
I think there's a lot of just having to play it by ear. I imagine the RFL and Super League have got, some sort of schedule or a calendar, that, if for example, if we're not out of lockdown, or if we're not allowed mass gatherings by this date, then that's going to go. If we're then not allowed it by this date, then that's going to go. And I think they will probably be crossing events off, the longer this goes on. But coming back to the original question, but I think, I think the Ashes is gone now. I don't think there's any sort of chance of that happening. Again, like Paul mentioned, mainly for the fact of flights. The Aussies aren't going to come over. I don't even think there'll be we couldn't have a team from France here, for example. I don't think by that point. Again, coming back to the Catalans argument, they're going to struggle. I think I like the idea of the cup at the end of the season. I really like that. I think that could work very much. Having that, about 4 weeks after the grand final, like I said, filter out the clubs and give them a break. But again, I think it does just all depend on when we can get going again. There might even be an argument that the season just is over already. We could come to sort of October, November time and still not be underway again. That realistically could happen. So we don't know. We really just don't know. It is just a waiting game at the minute. I think that's the most frustrating thing for everyone.
Well, do you think that would be the way? Because even though it's a different sport, several football leagues have gone for that, haven't they?
Exactly,
not the Premier League just yet, but several other things have.
Well, at least for Rugby League, we have a grand final, don't we? So obviously football, you have to, a lot of other teams that finish top of the champions. In Rugby League, we just have to have a grand final, and the winner of that's the champions, aren't they? Sometimes the champions, the grand finalists have come from 4th and 5th, they've won it and they're champions. So I think, we had a really shortened season, even as some saying, just another 5 or 6 games. If we get a playoffs in there, and a team won the grand final, I think we could regard them as win a one-off game at Old Trafford is what it's all about. So I do think there's hope that we'll get something in, but like Jack says, I think we just have to play it by ear.
Yeah,
what would you reckon? Just a bit of a radical, different idea. What would you reckon to like a Super League tournament, so just a knockout tournament? You pit 6 teams against 6 teams at the end of the year. Have knockout games, and you're finally left with 2 in the grand final.
I'm happy with that. Yeah,
6 weeks.
Like your initiative there, Jack.
I think that's a brilliant idea. The team that wins at Old Trafford's the champions, aren't they? I don't really think it will really matter how they get there, as long as it's fair on everybody.
Even from 12th, Paul.
Well, we've done it from 4th and 5th, so why not?
Ben and Jack know all about that.
Well, I think the best case scenario for us this season is just getting something on in front of some fans. Yeah. I agree with everything that's been said. I think I don't see games behind closed doors being a possibility. I know you mentioned the possibility of like pay-per-view and that, Paul, but I'm struggling to see that happening, to be honest. I think if we just get anything on this season in front of crowds, if we can manage to get a grand final winner and a Challenge Cup winner, I think we've overachieved with the position we're in. Because right now, I just think it's looking more and more unlikely as each day goes by that we're going to be playing at all this year. But if you had to we'll finish with this, each of you. I'll start with you, Joe, and then I'll come to you, Paul, and then you finish, Jack. Joe, how do you see, it's going to have to be a wild guess because nobody has a clue what's going on, really, let's be honest. How do you see the season playing out? What do you think will happen? When will we resume? And what competitions will be played?
I'll try and put my utmost faith in the general public to help quell this virus. Ben, I'll be a bit positive here, you can say that. I am hopeful for playing twice. Magic, I think, will be included, and then finish in December. But that's me, because in the earliest start of July, if not August, because remember, the players, I will say this, as groups, they need a month's training minimum together again. So I'll go for July, August resume and finish in December without the loop fixtures and the Ashes, but with the cup. That's me.
Paul?
Yeah, I agree. I think we'll come back in July. I think it will be behind closed doors. I totally get what you're saying. I definitely think it has viable, real difficulties of planning, but I do think the clubs kind of seem to be saying they want to come back behind closed doors. So I think that's probably where we'll go. I think it could be October, November before the crowds are allowed back in stadiums, unfortunately.
I'd say if we are to come back, then back in August, but I think that'll only be with crowds. Maybe a limit on crowds, maybe not full capacities, but I think a limit on crowds. I can't see us playing games behind closed doors. I think the Ashes are gone. I think loop fixtures are gone. Possibly even more than just the loop fixtures gone. Maybe even, like I mentioned earlier, a 10, 12 game season. Possibly also the Challenge Cup, although I still think they will stick with that. I think that'll stay. And I think we'll finish, I think mid-December maybe. mid-December.
I'm going to make that the last question. I'm going to have one more question for each of you. Where will the fight? Well, you're all going to predict that there's going to be some sort of climax to the season. Where do you see the two major finals being played? The Challenge Cup final and the Grand Final. Joe, I'll start with you again.
Well, I said earlier, didn't I? And I think I'll stick with it. Tottenham for the Grand Final and Old Trafford for the Cup Final. I'm sticking with that.
Paul?
Yeah, I think the Grand Final, when that Ashes Test was meant to be played at Tottenham's gone, I think that'll be a lovely change for everybody. And I would play the Cup straight after that. So 3 or 4 weeks after it, just before Christmas, have the final at Old Trafford.
I'm going to switch it up. I'm going to go Super League Grand Final, sticking at Old Trafford, and Challenge Cup going to Tottenham.
Interesting.
Why not?
Well, we'll hopefully be back with a few more of these chats over the next couple of days, the next few weeks. We'll try and have something more positive to talk about. But yeah, thanks for joining us, lads, and stay home and stay safe.
Yep, and everybody
Likewise.
Yep, see you.